It was a rainy Thursday night in Portland when my girlfriend looked me dead in the eye and said the words that still echo in my head. "You're too emotionless, Jake. I need a man who actually feels something." She stood there in my apartment doorway, arms crossed, her tone sharp like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed for weeks. I'd just come home from another 12-hour shift at the architecture firm, soaked, exhausted, still half thinking about blueprints and client calls. I dropped my backpack, looked at her, and tried to stay calm. "What do you mean, emotionless?" I asked. She scoffed, said I never fought for anything, that I was too calm, too controlled, that it felt like dating a wall. I wanted to explain that not yelling or crying at every argument didn't mean I didn't care. It meant I was trying to hold things together. But she'd already decided her version of the truth. "I need someone who makes me feel alive," she said, grabbing her suitcase from the corner like she planned this exit. I didn't stop her. I just said, "Then maybe you should find him." She blinked, maybe expecting me to plead, to break, but I didn't. She left that night, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving the apartment colder, but strangely peaceful. The first few days were quiet, painfully so, the kind of silence that hums in your chest. My coworkers noticed I wasn't talking much, but the truth was I had nothing left to say. I went to work, came home, ate, slept, and repeated. People say time heals everything, but what they don't tell you is that in the silence, you start to rebuild, not for them, but for yourself. I started running again, every morning before sunrise, pushing myself until the city streets blurred and the only thing I could hear was my heartbeat. I poured myself into design work, staying late at the firm, sketching projects that no one asked for, just because they made sense when nothing else did. Slowly, my body changed, leaner, stronger, and my mind followed. I didn't realize it then, but I was reinventing myself, piece by piece. 2 months later, I was at a bar downtown with my friend Derek, the kind of friend who tells you the truth without sugarcoating it. Over whiskey, he said, "You doing okay, man? Heard she left." I shrugged. "Yeah, she said I was too emotionless." He smirked. "That's funny. You're literally the most passionate guy I know. You just don't waste it on people who drain you." That hit me harder than the drink. Maybe he was right. Maybe being calm wasn't the problem. Maybe it was giving my peace to someone addicted to chaos. After that night, I decided to stop being the man she accused me of being. I signed up for the Portland Marathon, something I'd postponed for years. I started networking at work, taking lead on projects, traveling for client meetings. I upgraded my wardrobe, cut my hair, and started posting my photography online. Small things, but each one felt like a reclaiming of identity. Life started expanding again, like color bleeding back into a faded picture. And that's exactly when she came back. It was around midnight when I got the text, a number I'd deleted months ago. "Hey, is this Jake?" I knew immediately. I stared at the screen, debating whether to ignore it, but curiosity won. "Yeah, who's this?" I replied, though I already knew. "It's me," she said. "I've been seeing your pictures. You look different, happier." My stomach twisted, not because I missed her, but because I realized how predictable this was. They always come back when you stop caring. She said she wanted to talk, that she'd made a mistake, that she didn't know what she had until it was gone. I didn't reply. Instead, I tossed the phone aside and kept scrolling through photos of my latest project, a sleek riverside housing design that had just been shortlisted for a regional award. I was finally getting recognition at work, finally becoming the man I was supposed to be, not for her, not to prove anything, but because I'd stopped letting her definition of love limit me. The irony was poetic. The same calm she called emotionless was now being praised as discipline, focus, drive. The same quietness she mocked had become confidence. A few days later, I ran into her by accident at a cafe downtown. She looked almost the same jacket, same perfume, but something in her eyes had changed. Guilt, maybe, or regret. She smiled nervously, said, "You look really good, Jake." I smiled back, polite but distant. "Thanks. You too." There was a pause, the kind that used to be comfortable but now just felt heavy. She asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime, just to catch up. I said I'd think about it, knowing I never would. Because the truth is, I didn't owe her closure. The version of me she left, the quiet, loyal, stable man, had turned into someone she couldn't manipulate anymore. I wasn't angry at her. I was just done. That night, as I walked back through the drizzle-soaked streets of Portland, I realized I didn't feel the ache anymore. No resentment, no nostalgia, just peace. People always say revenge is about getting back at someone, proving them wrong, making them regret losing you. But real revenge is quieter. It's when you stop explaining yourself, stop reacting, and start living so fully that their opinion no longer matters. She wanted a man with his own life, and now I had one, a better one. And the beautiful irony? She was no longer a part of it.
A few weeks after that brief cafe encounter, she started finding excuses to text me again. Random things at first, like, "Hey, do you remember that restaurant we went to for your birthday?" Or, "I saw a photo of your project online. Congratulations." I'd reply with one-word answers. Nothing rude, nothing inviting either. Just neutral. I knew exactly what I was doing, keeping the balance of control where it should have been all along. She used to love when I chased, when I bent over backward to fix what she broke. But now, the silence between my replies spoke louder than any apology ever could. She texted again a few days later, "I miss how calm you made everything feel." That one made me laugh quietly because that was the same calm she once called boring. It was fascinating how the same traits they discard become the ones they crave once they're gone. She said she wanted to meet, just as friends, and even though I had no interest in reopening old wounds, part of me wanted her to see what she lost. Not to hurt her, but to remind myself that I'd moved past her shadow. So I agreed. We met at this rooftop bar downtown, one with string lights and a view of the Willamette River, the kind of place she'd once said was too fancy for us. When she walked in, I could see the surprise flicker in her eyes. I looked different now. Confidence changes your posture, your presence, even the way you breathe. She smiled awkwardly, said, "Wow, you look incredible." And I just nodded, thanking her like it was any other compliment. Over drinks, she started reminiscing, trying to pull the past into the present, talking about how good we used to be. I listened, but my mind wasn't there anymore. I noticed how every sentence she spoke revolved around her feelings, her confusion, her regret. She never once asked how I really was. That's when I realized people like her don't come back because they love you. They come back because they can't stand losing the version of themselves they had when they were with you. I kept the conversation light, smiled when appropriate, even laughed once or twice. But there was no spark. She felt it too. You could see it in the way her smile faltered every time I didn't feed into her emotional fishing. When she asked if I was seeing someone, I told her calmly, "I'm dating a little, taking my time." It wasn't a lie. I had gone on a few dates recently, nothing serious, just people who matched my pace. Her expression changed. For the first time since she walked in, she looked nervous. "Oh," she said softly, stirring her drink. "You deserve someone good, Jake." I smiled. "Yeah, I do." That was the moment her eyes dropped, and she realized she no longer had power here. After that night, she texted me even more. Compliments, nostalgia, late night "I miss talking to you" messages. I never ignored her completely. I just kept things distant, polite, calculated. Revenge, I've learned, isn't always about hurting someone. Sometimes it's about letting them stand in the silence they created and watching them realize they no longer have access to the warmth they took for granted. She asked me to come over once, said she wanted to talk properly, and out of curiosity, I agreed. Her apartment still smelled the same: vanilla candles, faint perfume, a touch of guilt. We sat on the couch where we used to argue over nothing. And she started crying halfway through her apology. "I didn't know what I wanted. You were good to me. I thought I needed excitement, but I just needed peace. And you gave me that. I just didn't appreciate it." I watched her, expressionless, not out of cruelty, but because I'd already mourned this version of us. I said, "It's okay. You made your choice. We both learned something." She reached for my hand then, maybe expecting me to hold hers, to give her some kind of redemption arc, but I pulled away gently and stood up. "I should go. I've got an early meeting." She looked up, eyes wide and red, whispering, "Jake, please, can we at least start over?" I smiled, not out of love, but closure. I said, "We did start over. You're meeting the version of me that doesn't chase anymore." And I walked out, leaving her sitting in the same silence she once left me in. Over the next few months, my life kept moving forward while she stayed stuck replaying the past. My project won the regional award and I was promoted to lead designer. I started traveling for work, Seattle, Denver, San Francisco, and meeting new people who didn't treat emotion control like a flaw. Sometimes I'd see her name pop up on my phone, but I never replied. Not because I hated her, but because I no longer had anything to say. The story was over. The final twist of revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was indifference. Real indifference, not the kind you fake to look strong. One day Derek sent me a photo from social media, her with some new guy. "Looks like she moved on," he said. I just smiled. Good for her. And I meant it. Because when you heal, you don't crave revenge anymore. You crave peace. You stop wanting them to regret it, you just hope they learn something from the version of you they lost. The funny thing is, months later when I was sitting in a new apartment overlooking the city, my dream place, I scrolled through my old photos and realized how much had changed. The man she called too emotionless had built a life so full of passion, discipline, and direction that there was no room left for anyone who didn't value it. She wanted chaos. I wanted clarity. And I won. Not by getting even, but by outgrowing the version of myself that needed her approval. That's the part no one tells you about moving on. You don't wake up one day and feel over it. You just live so well that one day you realize you haven't thought about them in weeks. And when you finally do, it's not with anger or sadness, it's just gratitude. Because without her leaving, I never would have found the strength to rebuild from scratch. That's the thing about people who call you emotionless. They don't realize it's not that you don't feel. It's that you finally learned to stop wasting your feelings on the wrong person.
A few months passed in quiet success, the kind of calm that doesn't need to announce itself. My days were steady. Morning runs along the river, evenings sketching new projects, weekends spent with people who felt like sunlight instead of storms. I'd stopped checking her socials, stopped wondering what she was doing, and for the first time in years, my peace wasn't conditional on someone else's mood. But peace, I've learned, has a way of being tested. It was early spring when the first crack appeared, a call from Derek one night. "Hey man," he said hesitantly, "did you know she's been talking about you?" I paused. "Talking how?" He sighed. "Said you'd changed because of her, that your whole glow-up was some kind of overcompensation, that you're still hung up on her." I laughed, the kind of laugh that comes when you don't even have the energy to be angry. "She really said that?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, she's telling people you're just pretending to be over her." That stung for about 30 seconds before the absurdity hit me. This was her version of control now, rewriting the narrative so she still mattered in my story. I didn't confront her. I didn't even post a response. I just went quiet and kept living. Because silence unsettles people who thrive on attention more than anger ever could. A few weeks later, I ran into her again. Pure coincidence. I was at an art exhibition, invited by a colleague, when I heard my name in that familiar voice that still carried a faint trace of guilt. "Jake?" I turned. There she was, standing a few feet away, wearing that same half-nervous smile. "Hey," I said simply,
polite but detached. She looked me up and down, her eyes scanning the suit, the watch, the quiet confidence that didn't need validation. "You look incredible," she said again. Same line as last time, only this time it sounded less like admiration and more like realization. "Thanks," I replied. "Have you been?" She shrugged. "Okay. Things are different." She hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking a lot about us lately." I nodded, letting her speak. "You've changed so much," she continued. "It's like you're a completely different person." I smiled faintly. "I am. That's kind of the point." She bit her lip, eyes flickering between pride and regret. "Do you ever miss it? Us?" I could have lied, said yes, played into whatever fantasy she was building in her head, but I didn't. "I miss who I thought we were, but I don't miss the version of me that existed back then." The words hung between us, heavy but clean. She looked away, blinking fast, pretending something in the distance had caught her eye. "You sound so cold now." I almost laughed. "You said you wanted a man who had his own life. You're just seeing what that looks like."
That night, she tried to text me again. Long paragraphs about closure, how she didn't mean to hurt me, how she was just confused. I didn't reply. I didn't delete the messages either. I just let them sit there, unread, like ghosts of a past life. But apparently, my silence didn't sit well with her. A week later, she showed up at my firm. Yeah, my actual workplace. Said she was just in the area and thought she'd drop by. My assistant buzzed me, confused, and when I stepped into the lobby, there she was, pretending to browse the brochures. "You can't be here," I said quietly. "This isn't the time." She smiled awkwardly. "I just wanted to see you, that's all." I didn't cause a scene, didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "You left me because I was too calm. But this is what calm looks like when it grows up. Boundaries." She froze, speechless. I turned and walked back to my office, leaving her standing there, cheeks burning, the receptionist staring uncomfortably. That was the moment I realized revenge doesn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes it's just the quiet authority of someone who's no longer accessible. After that, she tried subtler moves, tagging me in old photos, liking my posts, leaving comments that sounded nostalgic but harmless enough to look innocent. It was her way of fishing for a reaction. I gave her none. Meanwhile, I had started seeing someone new, Mia. She was the opposite of my ex in every way that mattered. Grounded, kind, calm without being dull. She didn't need chaos to feel alive. She found excitement and peace. Being with her felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. When I posted a photo of us hiking, nothing flashy, just 2 smiles and sunlight, I knew my ex would see it. She did. That night, another message came in. "She's beautiful. I'm happy for you." I could almost feel the bitterness behind the words. I typed back one thing. "Thanks. I'm happy too." And I was. From that point on, she faded. The calls stopped, the texts disappeared, the little attempts to stay relevant quietly died out. I had won, not by playing her game, but by refusing to step back into it. My revenge wasn't loud, wasn't cruel. It was the kind of revenge that glowed. Success, peace, stability. The kind that made her realize she could no longer reach me, not even emotionally. Months later, Derek told me he ran into her at a mutual friend's party. Apparently, she'd told people I had grown distant, that I had changed too much. He told her, "Yeah, he did, and that's exactly why he's happier now." Hearing that made me smile, because that's what healing really is. When other people can see the peace they tried to take from you, and it bothers them more than you'll ever admit. That night, I went for a drive through the city. The
The same streets I used to walk home heartbroken now felt like victory lanes. The rain was back, reflecting lights off the pavement, just like the night she left, except this time the silence wasn't hollow. It was full of lessons, of growth, of the quiet power that comes from knowing you survived something meant to break you. As I parked near the river and watched the water ripple under the bridge, I thought about her words one last time. "You're too emotionless." She was right in a way. I'd stopped letting emotions control me. But that didn't make me cold. It made me free.
It's been almost a year since that last message, and sometimes I still catch myself thinking about how far I've come. Not out of nostalgia, but out of gratitude. Life now feels steady, purposeful, almost poetic in how everything unfolded. My mornings begin with the soft clink of a coffee mug, sunlight spilling through the blinds of my downtown apartment that overlooks the same city that once felt too big when I was broken. I run the same river trails where I used to chase away heartbreak, only now I'm running beside Mia, the woman who somehow made me believe that love doesn't have to hurt to feel real. She doesn't ask me to prove I care. She just notices in the way I show up, quietly, consistently, without drama. She never once calls me emotionless. She calls me peaceful, grounded, reliable. Funny how one person can make the same traits feel like virtues instead of flaws. Sometimes when we're lying on the couch late at night, her head resting on my chest, she'll ask, "What was she like, the one before me?" And I'll pause, not because I miss her, but because I barely recognize the man who used to need her approval. She was a lesson, I usually say, smiling into the dark. A necessary one. And that's all I need to say because the rest of the story lives in the silence that follows, the kind that feels like closure, not emptiness. Professionally, things couldn't be better. The firm promoted me again, creative director now, and I've been mentoring younger architects, teaching them that good design isn't about flash, it's about intention. I tell them what I learned the hard way. If you build something strong at its core, it can handle any storm. I wasn't just talking about structures. Every blueprint I sketch now feels like a metaphor for what I rebuilt inside myself. Precision, patience, endurance. Even Derek noticed. One night over beers, he said, "Man, you're a completely different person from a year ago." I just laughed and told him, "No, I'm finally the same person I was supposed to be all along." He grinned, raised his glass, and said, "That's the best kind of revenge, when you stop trying to prove anything." And he was right, because real revenge isn't loud. It's the quiet confidence that comes when you realize they can't touch you anymore. Not your peace, not your progress, not your heart. Every once in a while, her name still pops up somewhere. A mutual friend's comment thread, a tagged photo, an old memory suggestion from my phone. The version of me that used to ache for closure doesn't exist anymore. Now I just scroll past, indifferent. She's with someone new, and maybe she's happy, maybe she's not. Either way, it's not my concern. That's the freedom I earned. People think revenge means payback, but it doesn't. Revenge is when you reach a point where their existence no longer stirs emotion. Not love, not hate, just neutrality. The ultimate victory isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so centered that they no longer have the power to define what right even means. One rainy evening, almost exactly a year after the breakup, I found myself back at that same cafe where she once told me I was too emotionless. The place had changed. New owners, new lighting, new music. I ordered black coffee, sat by the window, and watched people rushing through the drizzle. It hit me then. Time doesn't just heal, it rewrites everything. The pain that once felt endless was now just a footnote, and I was living in chapters she'd never get to read. I pulled out my sketchbook, the same one I'd used during those long, lonely nights, and drew a quick line of the river. Calm, reflective, unbroken. That's how I saw myself now. Calm didn't mean cold, it meant in control. Detached didn't mean heartless, it meant selective with who deserved access. Later that night, as I walked home through the rain, hand in hand with Mia, I passed by the old apartment where everything had ended. The window lights were off, but I could almost see the ghosts of that night. The suitcase, the door, the silence. Only now, instead of bitterness, I felt gratitude. Because that version of me, the quiet, patient man she called emotionless, had turned out to be my greatest strength. He didn't break, he evolved. And maybe that's the real twist. She thought leaving me would destroy me, but all it did was free me from proving my worth to someone who couldn't see it. When she got home, Mia curled up beside me and fell asleep while I stared at the city lights outside, thinking about how everything circles back eventually. The same calm she once used as an insult had become my foundation, the thing that kept me stable while the world spun. I whispered to myself, almost like a closing line to a story. I wasn't emotionless. I was just saving my emotions for someone who'd understand them. And with that, the last piece of anger I didn't even know I'd been holding finally dissolved. A year later, I got an email from a journalist writing a piece on architects who rebuilt after personal loss. They'd heard about my journey through a colleague. I gave a short interview, nothing dramatic, just honesty. When the article came out, the headline made me smile. He built homes that feel alive because he finally does too. That's when I knew the story had come full circle. The man who was once accused of feeling nothing had become known for creating spaces that made people feel everything. That was my redemption, my revenge, my peace, all rolled into one. And if she ever reads that article someday, which knowing her curiosity, she probably will, I hope she smiles too, not out of regret, but realization. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for someone who doubted your heart is to live a life that proves you never needed their permission to feel deeply. That's my story. Not about heartbreak, not about revenge, but about resurrection. The day she called me emotionless was the day she unknowingly gave me permission to become unstoppable.